Part 1. The night wind howled across the sleeping grove, making the bioluminescent fronds sway and flicker like dying candles. Young pressed closer to the ground, pulling the thermal blanket over his small body until only his 4 eyes remained visible. The other younglings had already fallen into their dormancy cycles, their breathing slow and steady, but could not sleep. Not tonight. Not when the keeper had promised to tell the story. The old one emerged from the shadows between the great trees, moving with the careful slowness of extreme age. The keeper's carapace had faded from the deep blue of youth to a pale gray that seemed to absorb the grove's soft light. When the elder settled beside, the young one heard the creak of ancient joints and the whisper of scales against bark. "You asked for this tale," the keeper said. "Are you certain you wish to hear it?" Wanted to say no. Every instinct in his young body screamed at him to refuse, to burrow deeper into the ground and pretend he had never asked. But the other younglings had already heard the story. They whispered about it in the feeding halls, their voices dropping to nothing whenever adults passed nearby. Needed to know. He needed to understand why even the bravest warriors have checked the sky before sleeping, why ships traveling through certain sectors of space flew dark and silent, why the word human was spoken only in whispers. "Tell me," said. The keeper's 4 eyes closed for a long moment. When they opened again, they held a distant look, as if seeing something far away and long ago. "In the time before the silence," the keeper began, "there was a great empire called the Hegemony. Their territory stretched across 40 star systems. Their warriors were the most feared in all the known galaxy. They had conquered 100 species and enslaved 1,000 worlds. Nothing could stand against them. Nothing could stop their advance." Had heard of every youngling had. The ruins of their civilization dotted dozens of planets, massive structures slowly crumbling to dust. But no one spoke of what had happened to them. No one explained why their cities stood empty. "They found the humans by accident," the keeper continued. "A scout ship passing through an unremarkable system on the edge of explored space. The humans had not yet learned to travel between stars. They were confined to a single world, a small blue planet circling a yellow sun. They watched them for a time, studying these new creatures." The keeper paused and saw something flicker across the old one's face. It might have been fear. They were not impressed by what they saw. The humans were small, smaller even than our younglings. Their bodies were soft, covered in thin skin that tore easily. They had no claws, no scales, no natural armor of any kind. They could not see in darkness. They could not hear the frequencies that most species used for communication. They were slow, weak, and seemingly unremarkable in every way. "Then why do we fear them?" asked. The keeper made a sound that was not quite a laugh, because they asked the same question, and then they learned the answer. The wind picked up, and somewhere in the darkness, a night creature called out its hunting cry, pressed closer to the keeper's side. They decided that humans would make useful slaves. Their bodies were weak, but they seemed clever enough to perform simple tasks. A raiding party was sent to the human world. They chose a small settlement on the edge of one of the human continents, a place with perhaps 200 individuals. The raid was meant to be quick and quiet. Take some specimens, study them, and return home. The keeper's voice dropped lower. The raid went wrong from the beginning. The humans did not react the way other species did. When the warriors appeared, the humans did not freeze in terror. They did not attempt to flee in blind panic. They fought, with tools, with rocks, with their bare hands. They fought knowing they could not win, knowing they would die, and they fought anyway. Felt his heart's beating faster. Did they kill any? A few, but that was not what disturbed the raiding party. What disturbed them was what happened when they tried to retreat with their captives. The humans followed them. Not the warriors who had fought in the village, but others. Humans from neighboring settlements who had heard of the attack. They tracked the ship for days across difficult terrain, never stopping to rest, never giving up the chase. But they escaped. They did, but they made a mistake. In the confusion of the raid, a human child was killed. She was only a few cycles old. The thought nothing of it. What was one small life compared to the glory of the hegemony? The keeper fell silent for a long moment. When the old one spoke again, the words came slowly, as if each one cost something to say. They returned to their territory and reported their findings. The humans were classified as a minor species of no particular interest. Some specimens were taken to research facilities for study. The child's death was recorded in a single line of a report that no one read, and for a time, that was the end of it. But it wasn't really the end, whispered. No, it was the beginning. The keeper's eyes found in the darkness. What they did not understand, what no species understood until it was too late, was that humans do not forget. They do not forgive. They do not move on. The parents of that child survived the raid. They survived the years of captivity that followed. And every single day, through every moment of suffering, they held on to one thing. What? Revenge. The word hung in the air like poison, found it hard to breathe. It took 15 cycles, the keeper continued. The humans learned. They watched their captors, studied their technology, memorized their weaknesses. They taught themselves to speak the language. They made themselves useful, valuable, trusted. And all the while they waited. When the opportunity finally came, they escaped. They stole a ship and fled into the darkness between stars. They assumed they would die. Space was vast and cold, and these were primitive creatures who knew nothing of navigation or survival beyond their world. The keeper made that sound again, the one that was almost a laugh but held no humor. They were wrong. The humans survived. They found others of their kind who had been scattered across space. They gathered them together, taught them what they had learned, and began to build, not just ships, not just weapons. They built something far more dangerous. What? A purpose, a reason to exist. Every human they found, every child born in those dark years, was raised with one truth above all others. They had taken something precious, and that debt would be paid. His voice was barely audible. How long did it take? 3 generations, 70 cycles. Most species would have forgotten. Most species would have moved on to new concerns, new lives. But humans are not like other species. They wrote the names of the dead on their walls. They taught their children to recite them. They built monuments to their loss and gathered around them to remember. The rage that burned in those first survivors was passed down like a sacred flame, growing stronger with each generation rather than fading. And when they were ready, the keeper's old eyes held depths that did not want to explore. When they were ready, they did not simply attack that would have been too quick, too merciful. Instead, they did something far worse. They hunted not armies, not fleets. They hunted individuals, every who had participated in that first raid, every officer who had given orders, every soldier who had followed them, every bureaucrat who had processed the paperwork. The humans found them all. All of them. Every single one. Some had fled to the far edges of space. Some had changed their names, their identities. It did not matter. The humans tracked them across 40 star systems. They hunted them for decades, and one by one they found them. The keeper leaned close, close enough that could feel the warmth of the old one's breath. That is what you must understand about humans, young one. That is what makes them the subject of nightmares. They do not stop. They do not rest. They do not give up. They simply keep coming through any darkness, across any distance for as long as it takes, and when they finally find what they are looking for. The keeper did not finish the sentence. The wind howled through the sleeping grove and understood that some things did not need to be said. The empty cities were answer enough. Part 2. Ambassador stood before the Council of First Contact, her tendrils arranged in the formal pattern of grave importance. The chamber was filled with representatives of newly contacted species, their varied forms shifting nervously in the dim light. Some had shells, others had wings. A few were little more than organized clouds of gas held together by electromagnetic fields. All of them had come to learn about the galaxy they had joined. All of them needed to understand the most important truth of civilized space. Humans were real, and humans were dangerous. Activated the holographic projector, and the image of a human appeared in the center of the chamber. The creature stood on two legs, its skin bare and vulnerable, its body seemingly designed for nothing in particular. Several of the observers made sounds of confusion or amusement. This was always how it began. This was always the first mistake. What you see before you, began, is the most successful predator in the known galaxy. I understand that this may be difficult to believe. Please reserve your judgments until the briefing is complete. She touched a control, and the image shifted to show the internal structure of a human body. Bones, muscles, organs, all laid out in clinical detail. Let us begin with the physical characteristics. Humans evolved on a world of unusual violence. Their planet experienced regular extinction events, extreme climate shifts, and constant competition for resources. Most species that develop intelligence do so in stable environments where they can focus on mental development rather than survival. Humans developed intelligence specifically because their world was trying to kill them. The image zoomed in on the human skeletal system. Their bones are made of a material that heals when broken, not simply regrows but actually heals. A human can shatter a limb and, given time, walk again as if nothing happened. Some humans have broken the same bone multiple times and continued functioning. Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the chamber. Had expected this. Their immune system, she continued, are perhaps even more remarkable. A human body contains trillions of microscopic organisms that wage constant war against invaders. When a new pathogen enters their system, these organisms adapt, evolve, and develop countermeasures. Diseases that would kill other species outright are defeated by human bodies within days. They call this process getting sick. For them, it is a minor inconvenience. The hologram changed again, showing a human face, focused on the eyes. Humans are pursuit predators. On there, they developed a hunting technique that most species find deeply disturbing. They would select a target and simply follow it. Not chase, not sprint, but follow, for hours, for days, for as long as it took. Their prey would run, hide, run again. The humans would simply walk after it, never stopping, never resting until the target collapsed from exhaustion. Then they would eat it. A gaseous entity near the back of the chamber made a sound of distress, nodded sympathetically. I know, this is difficult to process, but it gets worse. Humans do not require the extended rest cycles that most species need. They sleep for only a fraction of their day, and even this can be reduced in times of stress. During the extinction, human ships pursued fleeing vessels for weeks without rest. The crews worked in shifts, always watching, always following. They called them the sleepless ones. Many crews surrendered simply because they could no longer stay awake, while the humans remained alert at their stations. She brought up a new image, this one showing a human face contorted in what appeared to be pain. But the accompanying data readouts told a different story. This is a human experiencing what they call adrenaline response. When a human is frightened or threatened, their body releases chemicals that make them faster, stronger, and more resistant to pain. Fear does not paralyze humans. Fear makes them more dangerous. Their hearts beat faster, their muscles receive more blood, their reflexes sharpen. They become, in essence, better predators when they are afraid. Paused, letting this sink in. The chamber had grown very quiet. But the physical characteristics are not the most dangerous thing about humans. Many species have unusual biology. What makes humans truly terrifying is their minds. The hologram shifted to show various human weapons throughout history. Rocks tied to sticks, metal blades, projectile launchers, chemical explosives, nuclear devices, each more sophisticated than the last. Humans are creative destroyers. They do not simply use weapons that exist. They invent new ones. When they face a problem, they find a solution, even if that solution has never existed before. The weapons used against the hegemony were designed specifically to exploit weaknesses. They did not exist before the war began. Humans created them from nothing, purely to kill more efficiently. She highlighted one particular weapon, a sleek device that seemed almost elegant in its simplicity. This is what humans call a frequency disruptor, communicated through subsonic vibrations. This device generated targeted interference patterns that caused permanent damage to their communication organs. Humans designed it after studying captive for only a few cycles. They identified a weakness that they themselves did not know they had, and they exploited it without mercy. A crystalline being raised an appendage for attention. How many humans did it take to defeat the hegemony? Checked her data. Reliable estimates suggest that the human population at the start of the war numbered less than 50,000. The hegemony had a population of approximately 8 billion across 40 systems. Silent, complete and absolute silence. The war lasted 23 cycles, continued. By the end, the hegemony had ceased to exist as a functional civilization. Their worlds were not conquered. They were simply emptied. Survivors scattered to the far reaches of space, always running, always looking over their shoulders. Many chose death rather than face capture by human forces. She changed the display to show a simple map of current human territory. Today, humans control a modest region of space. They have established trade relationships with several species. They have joined the Galactic Concord as peaceful members. They smile at our diplomats and sign our treaties and follow our laws. She paused. But we never forget what they are capable of, and we never, ever give them a reason to remember what they can do. The hologram displayed the first and most sacred law of the Galactic Concord, written in 100 languages. Never give humans a reason to create something new. Looked out at the assembled representatives, seeing the fear beginning to dawn in their varied eyes. They are patient, they are creative, they hold grudges for generations, and once they decide that something must be destroyed, they do not stop until it is gone, not defeated, not subdued, gone. They learned this lesson. The hegemony that ruled 40 systems is now a cautionary tale told in the darkness of sleeping groves. She deactivated the hologram. Welcome to the Galactic Concord. Treat the humans with respect. Trade with them fairly. Never harm their children. And if you ever find yourself the target of human anger, do not try to fight. Do not try to hide. Simply pray to whatever powers you believe in and hope they decide you are not worth the effort. The briefing ended. The representatives filed out in silence, each carrying with them a new understanding of the galaxy they inhabited. Watched them go, remembering her own reaction when she had first learned the truth about humans. She had not slept properly for months afterward. Even now, sometimes, she woke in the darkness and thought she heard footsteps following her. Patient footsteps, footsteps that never stopped. That, she had come to understand, was the true horror of humans. Not what they did, but what they made others imagine. The fear they inspired was perhaps their greatest weapon of all, and unlike other weapons, it never needed to be used to be effective. It simply existed, a shadow that fell across the entire galaxy, reminding every species of what could happen if they made the wrong choice. The humans were watching, the humans were waiting, and the humans never ever forgot. Part 3. Admiral Way stood on the observation deck of the Unrelenting, watching the fleet assemble around the artificial wormhole. The ships came from a dozen different species, their designs reflecting their creators in ways both obvious and subtle. Sleek cruisers hung beside bulky crystalline transports, gaseous entity carriers, little more than magnetic containment fields wrapped around living clouds, drifted past the angular warships of the mechanical consensus. And surrounding them all, moving with a terrible grace, were the human vessels. Behind her, the keeper of an ambassador waited in silence. They had come as observers, representatives of the species that had once feared humans above all else. Now they stood on a human ship, preparing to fight beside creatures they had taught their children to dread. The galaxy had changed. A new threat had emerged, one that made old enemies seem like old friends. The consumption had appeared from the void between galaxies, a swarm intelligence older than most stars. It was not a species in any traditional sense. It was a hunger given form, a need to absorb and expand that had driven it across the universe for billions of years. It consumed civilizations the way a fire consumed forests, adding their knowledge and technology to its ever-growing mass. It had never been stopped. It had never been satisfied. It simply moved from galaxy to galaxy, leaving emptiness in its wake. When the first consumption scouts had reached the edge of conquered space, the member species had panicked. The Crystalline Council had voted for immediate surrender. The gaseous collective had begun evacuating toward the galactic core. Even the mechanical consensus, with their cold logic and calculated responses, had concluded that resistance was statistically pointless. Then someone had suggested asking the humans for help. Admiral remembered the council session where the decision had been made. She remembered the fear in the eyes of species that had spent generations teaching their young to avoid humans at all costs. She remembered how they had looked at her, desperate and ashamed, asking the monsters of their nightmares to save them from something worse. She had said yes. Of course she had said yes. That was what humans did. "Admiral," the keeper said, breaking the silence, "may I ask you something?" Turned from the viewport. The old alien looked smaller than she had expected, its gray carapace worn smooth by centuries of living. She had read the reports about the keeper's species, had learned that this was the same individual who had told the story of the extinction to countless young aliens. This creature had spent its life teaching others to fear humans, and now it stood on a human ship, its fate in human hands. Ask said, "How do you face something like the consumption without fear?" Considered the question. Outside, the last ships were taking position around the wormhole. In a few minutes, they would transit to the battle zone. Many of them would not return. She knew this with the certainty of someone who had studied the enemy's capabilities, calculated the probabilities, and made peace with the numbers. "We are afraid," she said. "Every human in this fleet is afraid. We would be fools not to be. The consumption is vast, ancient, and has never been defeated. By any reasonable measure, we should not be able to stop it. The mathematics say we will lose." The keeper's 4 eyes widened slightly. "Then why do you fight?" Smiled. It was a small smile, the kind that did not reach her eyes. "Because fear is not the same as surrender. We learned that a long time ago, back when we were still trapped on a single world, surrounded by things that wanted to kill us. We were small, weak, slow. Everything was faster than us, stronger than us, better equipped for survival. We should have died out 100 times over. The mathematics said we would lose." She turned back to the viewport, watching the ships of the Allied fleet arrange themselves into formation. "But we are still here. And every single predator that hunted us, every disease that ravaged us, every natural disaster that nearly wiped us out is either extinct or contained. Not because we were stronger, not because we were faster, but because we refused to accept that the mathematics were the final answer." Ambassador moved to stand beside the keeper. "I have spent my career studying humans. I have read every report, analyzed every conflict, tried to understand what makes you different from other species. I still do not fully understand." Nodded. "That is because you are looking at the wrong thing. You study our biology, our technology, our tactics. You try to find the secret in our bodies or our weapons, but the secret is not in those things." "Then where is it?" "In our refusal to believe that we cannot win." His voice was quiet, almost gentle. "Every species that develops intelligence eventually faces a moment where the universe tells them they are going to die. Most species accept this. They surrender, or they flee, or they simply wait for the end. Humans do not. We cannot. There is something in us, something that evolution planted deep in our minds, that screams against the dying of the light." She placed a hand against the viewport, feeling the cold of space through the thick glass. The consumption has consumed 10,000 civilizations. It has absorbed the knowledge of species that were ancient when our sun was young. It believes that all things eventually become part of it. That resistance is merely a delay, not a solution. The wormhole began to activate, its edges glowing with energies that bent light and twisted space. The consumption has never faced humans. It does not understand that we will not simply delay. We will not accept that the mathematics are final. We will find a way to win, or we will die trying, and if we die, we will make our death so costly that the consumption will remember us forever. We will carve our name into its memory with fire and blood and the screams of its dying components. We will make it fear the idea of facing another species like us. The keeper's voice was barely a whisper. Is that not just another form of madness? Turned to face the old alien. Her eyes held something that the keeper had seen in human eyes across 100 worlds, in 1,000 stories, in the nightmares of every species that had ever learned what humans could do. Yes, she said, it is exactly that. Our greatest strength and our greatest weakness is that we are willing to be mad. We are willing to throw ourselves into the fire if it means our children will be warm. We are willing to fight battles we cannot win if it means our enemies will think twice before fighting the next battle. We are willing to be the monsters that other monsters fear, because we have learned that the universe does not care about fairness or justice or survival. The universe only cares about what refuses to die. The wormhole stabilized. The fleet began to move forward, ship by ship, into the unknown. The consumption is ancient, said. It is patient. It is inevitable. But it has never faced a species that made stubbornness into an art form. It has never faced a species that holds grudges for generations. It has never faced a species that invented hope as a weapon and wielded it against the darkness itself. She walked toward the bridge, the keeper and ambassador falling into step behind her. They made the mistake of harming a human child. They learned what happens when you give humans something to fight for. The consumption is about to make the same mistake on a galactic scale. It is threatening every child of every species in this galaxy. It is giving every human alive something to fight for. The bridge doors opened, revealing the controlled chaos of a ship preparing for battle. Officers called out coordinates and status reports. Screens flickered with tactical data, and at the center of it all, the command chair waited. Took her seat and looked out at the stars. The consumption believes it is inevitable, she said. Let us teach it what humans have learned. Nothing is inevitable except change, and we are very, very good at change. The fleet transited through the wormhole. On the other side, the consumption waited, vast and ancient and hungry. It had consumed 10,000 civilizations. It had absorbed 1 billion years of knowledge. It knew, with mathematical certainty, that all resistance was futile. It was about to learn what every monster eventually learned, that somewhere in the darkness, there was always something more frightening than the dark itself, and that something had learned to smile at the void, to laugh at the inevitable, and to keep walking forward when all logic said to stop. The humans had arrived, and the nightmares of the galaxy had finally found something to fear.